Alright, how is it going, everybody? It is your State Alchemist Edward Elric here, back with a brand new reaction video, and also, well, this is one I was planning on making because this reaction video is definitely going to show you guys why I was never interested in um in this version of Marvel's Capcom because it's so terrible. So I'm not going to speak too much, and let's get this thing started.
The 90s were a magical time for fighting games. Most, if not quite all, of the franchises debuted in that era went on to be staples of the genre, and were destined to define generations of players over 3 decades. It was in this golden era that the world was first introduced to Capcom's Versus series with the release of X-Men vs. Street Fighter, a game that would help to popularize the tag team fighting subgenre and eventually lead to the creation of Marvel vs. Capcom. The Marvel vs. Capcom series has been the premier tag team fighter for almost 20 years, with many considering MVC2 to be one of the best fighting games of all time. For decades, Marvel has been one of the cornerstones of the
second one was the
FGC
best in
and
the
a mainstay at EVO, the biggest fighting game tournament every year. The amount of hype generated from watching MVC played at the highest level cannot be understated. The community of fans built around MVC is full of passionate, dedicated people. Players who might dabble in other games, but always come back home because
I think we're gonna see it. Double time! Hold on. The king! I'm not even gonna knock again. Oh my god! He just done it!
for a long time, it seemed like Marvel was untouchable, a staple of the FGC too large to fail. But in 2017, all of that changed with the release of Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. MVCI was so poorly received that EVO decided for the first time in 17 years there would be no Marvel on the main stage. So how did this happen? What did Capcom do that was so egregious that hordes of fans fled from their beloved franchise? Today, we'll answer that question as we take a look at the fall of one of the greatest series of all time. This is Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. Before the announcement of MVCI, fans of the series had resigned themselves to the possibility of never seeing another entry into the franchise. Marvel's surge in popularity since 2008 and the massive success of the MCU made the development of another Marvel vs. Capcom title seem too expensive to be feasible. Despite this, in 2016, rumors started to circulate of a possible fourth installment in the franchise. Slowly but surely, information began to leak out. Aspects of the game like 2v2 combat and a focus on the MCU characters in the Marvel camp all made their way into the realm of public discussion. But despite many reservations caused by these rumors, MVC fans were hyped that there might be another game coming. Then, in December of 2016, at PlayStation Experience, fans got what they had been waiting for: confirmation that their dreams were coming true despite the odds. While the trailer didn't show much, it did reveal two new additions to the franchise: Captain Marvel and the highly requested X from the Mega Man series.
The homie Maximilian.
Fuck you! Oh my god, what the fuck? How the Wow! Dude, this is
Over the next few months, hype for Infinite began to build as Capcom released more gameplay trailers and revealed a few more new characters like Ultron and Sigma. However, the hype train came to a screeching halt at E3 2017, with the reveal of Infinite's first story trailer. It was here that the reservations and concerns fans had been putting aside until now came back in full force, when they finally got to see some of the character models up close. Well, one specifically.
Oh,
Yeah,
man.
that's
I mean,
reason
what can
number
I
one.
say
They messed
about
up my girl like
Shelby's
that,
face
really
hasn't
bad.
been said already. It was just, the expectation just fell through the roof. Every gleam of hope that people had for the game kind of just died out. Some people still kept hope, but you know, once they saw the story gameplay and just how Chun-Li looked and just how the art style was, a lot of people were super skeptical at that point about the game. But at the moment in time, we still had hope that the developers were gonna listen and they were gonna adjust some things, take more time on the game, not rush it out. But I mean, you could see what happened with the game.
And the rough visuals didn't stop with Chun-Li. Many of the returning fighters from MVC3 looked a bit worse for wear. According to an anonymous Capcom employee, the budget for MVCI was pretty bare bones, and in the face of this, devs decided to grab character models from MVC3 and use them for their new game. However, the stylized aesthetic from 3 didn't make the transition to the more realistic Infinite without some hiccups. And with Infinite already lacking a dynamic or striking style like MVC3 had, these lackluster, and in some cases horrifying character models created an impression on the public that MVCI had trash visuals. While some of these would be smoothed out over time, the damage had been done, and the fanbase was officially in troll mode.
Ads on YouTube must be so annoying, but with 3 clicks, you can install an ad blocker and you'll never see ads again. Step
What the fuck is wrong with your face? Dude, what happened to Chun-Li? What the fuck happened to her face? And Chun-Li?
Meanwhile, at the same E3 event, attendees were able to feast their eyes on Arc System Works' newest game, Dragon Ball FighterZ, a game with all the beautiful animation, style, and fan service that MVC fans had been hoping for in their own game.
Rock and roll done here. I don't see any tag mechanics yet. 3v3. 3v3. There he is. Yo. Oh my god. It's fucking Marvel. It's fucking Marvel, dude.
It was a hard pill to swallow. The series, always known for their tight visuals and animations, had been bested. But all of that can be forgiven if everything else in the game rocks, right? Unfortunately, as many fans had suspected, the roster for MVCI failed to include any of the stable characters that were owned by Fox at the time. This includes the entire cast of X-Men and the Fantastic Four series. In other words, no Doctor Doom, no Magneto, and saddest of all, no Juggernaut. Instead, a whole suite of new MCU-based entries would take their place, with characters like Captain Marvel, Gamora, and Ultron taking center stage. While these characters are fine in their own right, fans wasted no time making their displeasure heard. After all, Magneto had been a fan favorite since X-Men Children of the Atom in 1994, and his exclusion, among others, just rubbed fans the wrong way. In response to this outcry, Peter Combo Fiend Rosas said in an interview, quote, "If you were to actually think about it, these characters are just functions. Magneto is a favorite because he has an 8-way air dash. Well, guess what? Nova can do the same thing. Captain Marvel can do the same thing. We wanted to make sure that if a legacy character doesn't happen to make the roster this time, that playstyle would be represented."
Well, yeah, when Combo Fiend had said the function thing, dude, it was, one, it upset people, too. It was the biggest meme about the series in itself. All characters were just a function after that. They weren't even their own personality.
While there has been plenty of speculation in retrospect that this statement was the only way Capcom could avoid blaming Marvel for their misfortune, at the time, this was taken as an insult to almost the entire FGC. Players from all scenes chimed in, feeling disrespected by the notion that they don't have any connection to their characters outside of the functions they perform. As any fighting game player will tell you, whichever character you decide to main in-game is someone you will spend hundreds of hours with. You learn every voice line, every sound effect, the exact timing on all their animations. Going through this process over years, or in Marvel's case, even decades, creates a sense of partnership with your character. A bond not easily shaken. To have someone, no matter how well-intentioned, effectively say that the relationship between player and character isn't real is just downright disrespectful. Taking all of these factors into consideration, it's no surprise that casual playership would diminish. Fighting games can get expensive after all, with DLC characters, stages, and costumes, so your average casual player might think twice before investing into a game with so many faults. This effect was compounded as the much more attractive-looking Dragon Ball FighterZ was just around the corner. With this in mind, the success or failure of the game would ultimately depend on the competitive scene, and whether or not they embrace the title. MVCI launched in September of 2017, in a timing that felt wrong in all the worst ways. September was far too late in the year to be included in EVO 2017, while also being far too early to surf the wave of hype sure to be generated by the release of Avengers Infinity War 7 months later. With the possibility of the next EVO almost a year away, Capcom had to do something to create hype for a title that ultimately had nothing going for it. So, for their inaugural year of competition, Capcom set up an event known as the Battle for the Stones Tournament Series, where past EVO champions would be pitted against 6 new contenders. These contenders would have to place first in one of the 6 qualifying tournaments, claiming that tournament's Infinity Stone. These Infinity Stones, along with qualifying you for the finals, would give you a special power that would change the rules of the tournament in your favor. Effects like changing your opponent's controller layout and swapping your place in the bracket, all but guaranteed an interesting, if not completely unbalanced, tournament experience.
Really mess up those buttons. There it
There
is,
it is.
Reality Stone.
There it is, and the look on Ryan's face.
Now let's see exactly how Justin Wong is going to configure Ryan LV's pad.
This was effectively Capcom's last chance to sell their game, and as such, it was important that it goes smoothly. Unfortunately, things did not go smoothly.
That event was all over the place, alright? So for starters, when they had explained the rule set to us, they're like, oh, if you have a gem, you have to say what round you're gonna use it on, and you have to call it before the match starts, right? So before, the 2 competitors play, I had, I think the Power Stone, right? I had to say, match 3, I'm gonna use my Power Stone, right? So they do the whole theatrics, the lights hit the floor, purple color, Power Stone, whole theatrics for it. So that was kind of weird, right? You had to call ahead of time what match you wanted to use it. So you could say even match 4, but if a match 4 never happened, then you would never use your stone. Now, the next day, when it was just me and Chris for grand finals, they're like, oh, you can use the stone at any point during any match.
Uh-oh. Oh, but Chris, he activates the Mind Stones, which means you're going to have some dookie characters on your side, Cloud.
So there was just no consistency. It's like, okay, well, why wasn't that the case yesterday? Why are you changing how it operates now? Because the bracket could have looked completely different if competitors could have chose exactly what round and on the fly. So you see where the issue lies, just how it was all inconsistent and kind of like a train wreck, because they just kept changing the rule set as they went.
After this disappointing outcome, it was hard to keep hype for the game going. A month after the Battle for the Stones event, in January of 2018, Dragon Ball FighterZ released, and immediately crushed MVCI in both fan reception and sales numbers, with DBFZ selling 2 million copies in their first week, more than double the amount that MVCI
that's what
made
happened.
in 3 months. If this wasn't enough, a month later, EVO announced its 2018 lineup, and for the first time in 17 years, Marvel wasn't included. In its stead, 2 other team fighters had made their way in, DBFZ, and the unreleased at the time, Blaze Blue Cross Tag Battle. This was effectively the final nail in the coffin.
They really put in Blast Blue Cross Tag over me. He ain't even here yet. He ain't even here. That game could flop.
While stream numbers and tournament entry up to this point had been holding relatively steady, being snubbed by EVO was too much for most fans to bear. The word went out that Marvel was dead, and all but the most dedicated fans fled from the title. Many went to DBFZ, including Battle for the Stones champion, Cloud 805. Others transitioned to other titles, or temporarily fell out of the competitive scene entirely. However, a small group of players decided that they wouldn't go quiet into that good night. They weren't going to stick with MVCI. That had way too much baggage. But there was something else they could do. That's right. They were going to revive Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3.
The way you see it is said to depend on where you sit. And that's true. You think it also gets which is why I'm with our groundbreaking Elric technology, bringing hot, cold, and touch into one extraordinary season.
Kevin Ha, among others, began the search for a way to bring back Marvel 3.
About a year and a half ago, I stopped playing Marvel Infinite and Dragon Ball FighterZ, and I just went back to playing Marvel 3 because that was one of the games I most enjoyed. And a lot of people were a little bit upset about how bad Marvel 3 netcode is, so a lot of people couldn't play against each other. And me and a couple other people started trying to look for ways to play Marvel 3 online optimally, and we stumbled across Parsec.
Since the Parsec service hadn't really been used for the purpose of fighting games at this point, it came down to Kevin and his group to figure out a way to make it work.
It's kind of like TeamViewer, where you can remotely connect to somebody else and play with them on their local connection, which made the netcode extremely bearable and a lot easier to play because you don't have to deal with the constant lag spikes. And once we figured that out, we just kept researching on ways to make it better. And once we figured out the way with cloud PCs and Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, yeah, the online has been really solid, and it's just created such a really good online environment for people to start playing again, and for new players to actually learn the game, which is, I think, what led to the resurgence.
After this infrastructure had been put in place, players began to slowly but surely make their way back to Marvel 3. But in some ways, it wasn't the same Marvel that they had left behind. Thanks to the efforts of many fans and modders, new characters began to make their way into the game. Some were conversions from MVCI, while others were alternate versions of characters, complete with new abilities and new assists.
And the mods on the PC version of this, bro, it looks so much better.
Oh, wait, what the? Whoa, wait, what are you doing? Whoa! Excuse me? The EX balance patch did a lot to smooth the edges of Marvel 3, ensuring characters like Virgil and Morgan were nerfed appropriately, while buffing the bottom tier characters like Iron Man and Cien Ko, and giving them new moves and supers to make them playable. Similar to what Project M did for Super Smash Bros. Brawl, UMVC3EX has brought life back into a scene that had almost moved on, bringing old players back into the fold, as well as some new blood who are eager to play some quote-unquote real Marvel.
Supers. Okay.
Thanks to this renewed interest, Kevin has been able to reclaim his Marvel TO spot at Wednesday Night Fights, holding tournaments for the new version of Marvel 3. After starting small, the tournament has grown back into a respectable 32-man bracket. Not an easy feat for a 9-year-old game. At this point, the question of what the future holds for the MVC community is up in the air. For now, there are plenty more mods and new characters on the horizon, but beyond that, hope for a sequel seems to be bleak. The financial loss from MVCI is a wound that both Capcom and Marvel won't soon forget. And with Disney's acquisition of Fox, bringing Fantastic Four and the X-Men back into the fold, a new MVC game would actually stand a chance of being restored to its former glory. Until then, the fans that have stuck with Marvel thus far will continue to create new content and keep the game they love most alive. Because after all, it's not just any old fighting game. It's Marvel, baby! Yeah. Haha. This video is made possible thanks to our wonderful patrons. Massive thank you to everyone on this list, and shout out to Arknox, Sammy, Shampoo, Weeaboo, Nathan, Nate, Mob, Sierra, Foxy, and Lyra for being our platinum supporters. And an extra special shout out to Rafi, Noodles, Marco, and Steven for being our diamond supporters. Way to go, guys! You made it. If you also want to support our channel and unlock perks, check out the Patreon link in the description below or join our Discord server. If you want to help us out in a different way, leaving a like, subscribing, and hitting the bell to stay up to date is also appreciated. My name is Jonah. Thanks for watching.
Thank you. I don't think you realize how much that means.
The next level of nerds. Nerds Gummy.
Alright guys, so this has been my reaction to the rise and fall of Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. And so hope you guys have enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Yeah, and I guess I'll see you guys in the next one.